Okay, here
Oh,
we go.
here's Tom.
Hey, Tom.
I'm
Hey,
consenting to be recorded.
you are consenting to be recorded, but see, I can, because I did that because of Lois. Lois, I'm blaming you for that. No worries with that. I had stopped the recording, so I had to catch myself. We've done that before, Liz. Don't worry about it in terms of going through there. So this is Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays. It's our weekly webinar series. It's brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. Before we get started up here tonight, we just want to make sure that everybody has boarded the right flight. This evening, we are talking about women and wealth, specifically financial empowerment for women. And we've got a special guest who we will introduce in a couple of minutes, who's joining us from Rosie's place in Boston. A little pre-flight checklist for everybody. One, the event is being recorded, but you don't have to concern yourself with either your name or image on the screen, because all that is being recorded is the part of the screen that I am sharing. All the microphones are muted. You can have your cameras on or off. That's up to you, because again, like I said, it's not going to be part of the recording. We do ask if you have questions. There is a chat box feature that you can use. We do have a question period at the end as well, but you know, please, if it's top of mind and it comes up, you can certainly type into the chat box. My co-pilot, who is here and I'll introduce in a second, is here to, one, make sure that I stay on pace and get this flight in on time, but also he's there to check the chat box, and he will be popping in with some questions if they come up as we go along. So speaking of which, your presenters for your pilots for tonight's flight, I am Tom Alessi. I am the president of the Aries Foundation for Financial Education. I've been in financial services now for just over 21 years. I am an investment advisor, which means that I am a fiduciary when it comes to giving guidance and advice. Craig, my co-pilot, why don't you bring yourself in?
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the Vice President of the Aries Foundation. I've been doing this a little over 16 years now as a financial services representative. And I work with families and small businesses and help them to develop a plan so they can have meet their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
Tremendous, appreciate it. Like I said, Craig will be manning the chat box. He will be making sure that if any questions come in, that we are able to try to get to them as we progress along here. So mention to you that this is brought to you by the Aries Foundation for Financial Education, Inc. We are a nonprofit. Our mission is trying to help everybody have a better relationship with their money. You can check us out on www.ariesfoundation.org. But it's really just, we're trying to help everybody, whether it's through presentations like this, workshops, or one-on-one counseling. That's really the mission behind Aries. Do have some disclosures before I start up. One, the presentation tonight is purely educational. We do record, as I mentioned, and we share this not only on our website, but also on our YouTube channel. All we ask is that if you are also sharing this, that you do so just in that format as an educational piece, right? So Aries Foundation is a nonprofit. We're not affiliated with any broker-dealer or securities-related business, and it is not a registered investment advisor. We stress, Aries always will tell you that if you ever have any questions, if they are legal, financial, or tax related, that you seek out the help of a professional to go over those questions and help you out with your situation. Okay, that was a lot of talking for me. So there are drinks on this flight. We call it Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays, but Craig and I like to refer to this as Think with a Drink, right? So the idea behind this is, as Craig sort of mentioned earlier, you know, the information that we share, we take it very, very seriously. We just don't take ourselves too seriously. So a lot of this, some of these subjects can get a little bit tenuous. They can be out, you know, people just they're not fun subjects, let me put it that way. So what we like to do is make sure that everybody's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more casual. And we can't think of a better way to do that than to have something that's quenching your thirst to go along with it. Tonight, I am drinking, this is Down East cider donut hard cider. And there's a reason behind this, because usually I'll have a beer at one of these things. But for those of you who know, in the Catholic religion, Lent started yesterday. And I, in my wonderful wisdom, decided to give up beer for Lent. So I cannot have a beer while I am doing Thirsty for Knowledge Thursdays. But I will try this cider donut thing because I don't consider that beer. Craig, what are you drinking tonight?
You're giving up beer for all of Lent?
What?
You're giving up beer for all of Lent?
Yes, I've done it before. I know that's hard to believe, and you know, it's an inside thing there for to understand that. And yeah, it's hard to believe, but I've done it before. And actually, the last time I did it and gave up coffee too.
Is there money on this thing?
No, I wish there was.
Well, so what I'm drinking tonight is actually wine, having Bar Harbor Cellars blueberry wine. And I drove all the way up to Bar Harbor to actually get, well, a while ago, not today, and drinking it out of my official Zoom wine glass. You probably can't read it. There you go, official Zoom wine glass. And just like most flights, both of your pilots will be drinking on this flight.
Yes, and we will, once we bring our guest in, find out what she is imbibing in as well. So with that, we're going to get started on the presentation here. As I said, we do have our special guest, which we are very excited to bring on in a second. We're going to talk about women in the workforce, some common mistakes that are not just directed at women. This is common mistakes that happen to everybody. Some investing concepts and things to be looking at. Women and planning, more specific now, why some of that is more centric towards women. 5 steps that you can take, and then a clear vision for going forward. And I do want to say this before I bring our guest in. You know, one of the things for Craig and I is we both try to think that we're you know, more center than, if you will, on either side here with all of this, that we can do the numbers and the research and the statistics, but we understand we're guys, right? So what do we know? So that's why we want to bring on our special guest tonight. She is Elizabeth. She goes by Liz Chaves. She is the Chief Finance and Administrative Officer for Rosie's Place in Boston. I'm not going to steal her thunder. I'm going to let her do a little bit about her and about Rosie's Place. But before I do, Liz, what are you drinking tonight?
I didn't look at the bottle, but I know it's a special Italian wine, some kind of special red Italian wine. I didn't really look at it. I just grabbed what I saw. I ran out of my Portuguese wine, so I decided to hop on to Italian tonight.
Well, cool.
Let's go.
So cheers. Cheers, everyone. Well, thank you, Tom and Greg, for inviting me to be part of this Financial Empowerment for Women series here on this webinar here. So just a little bit about myself. I've been at Rosie's Place for over 6 years now. I have over 25 years of nonprofit experience. I started out, when I graduated from Bentley University back in the late 90s, I started out, I jumped right into the nonprofit world, you know, basically, you know, as a junior accountant, and moved my way up to senior accountant and then controller. And pretty much I stayed at the controller level, you know, just growing into larger organizations, more responsibility, more teams, more. And so through the years, that's what I've done. I did take a loop over to the corporate world for 3 years. And then I quickly learned that corporate world is not for me. So back to the nonprofit world I go. And so when I started, so I've gone through many nonprofits through the years, and I've stayed for, you know, 7 to 10 years in each one. This most recent one here at Rosie's Place, I started out as Director of Finance, and then VP of Finance, and now I'm the Chief Finance Administrative Officer. And it's basically, the organization has grown so much that it took us to restructure. So we've restructured twice in the past 6 years that I've been there. And so it was just a growth opportunity for me. And so I'm just moving right along with the organization. So here I am. So I'm delighted and so happy to be there. It's a great organization to work for. And so that being said, Rosie's Place is the first all-women shelter in the United States. It was founded back in the early 70s, and it really is a sanctuary for poor and homeless women. many of the services that we provide to our guests are emergency type services. So when a woman walks into Rosie's place, we want them to feel welcomed. And, so we consider ourselves that we have like the special sauce. And so our special sauce is that when someone walks into our building, we want them to feel welcomed, and that we're there to help them in any way that they need help. And we want them to walk out of that door feeling better than they did when they walked in. And it's not always going to be effective. Doesn't always work, obviously, but that's like our main purpose of existing, is to making women feel like we're there, someone is there for them, and that we can help them in any which way that we can. And so with that, we have emergency services, which consist of dining room. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner is served to them. We have a pantry where they can come in and shop and just, take food home with them. They come in and take showers, use the computers, phones. We have a locker where they can keep clothes in their locker for like 6 months. Some of them actually use our address as their mailing because they're homeless and they have nowhere to have their mail sent to, so they send it to Rosie's place. We also have an overnight shelter program. It's funny because I think a lot of people think of Rosie's Place as a shelter only, and it's actually a very small part of what we do. We have 20 beds, and it's basically temporary housing where our ladies can come in. They can stay 3 weeks at a time, and it's just just to give them a breather of like they're out on the streets, they're feeling overwhelmed, and some of them suffer through a lot of trauma and so on. So when they come in, they can stay for 3 weeks at a time. It's kind of like they can feel like a breather, that they can just think about what they need to do, what is their next steps that they're going to be doing. So
that your special sauces, I've met some of your employees there, and they're fantastic people, and I know that's special sauce.
Yeah, that's a special sauce. We want to make everyone feel welcomed and happy, and just feel a little bit better than what they walked into the building with. So there's lots of challenges now with COVID and so on, but so the additional one of the largest programs that we have is the advocacy program. And so if you think of advocates as being like case managers, not true case managers where they sort of follow all their history and everything, but basically it's like meeting them where they're at on that day. So if they need help with finding housing, need help paying the utility bills, paying back rent, we have a legal program that helps them with, any legal issues that they may be going through, whether it's quarry issues or, the moratorium, debt. We have a debt clinic that helps them with, walk through their debt and just kind of talk about their debt and, budgeting and that sort of thing. And then we have a stabilization program. The stabilization program helps those women that are housed to feel like they're still welcomed, right, in the world, right? So even though they get housed, we have like a friendly visitor that goes and visits with them and making sure that they're paying their bills, that they're on top of things, that they still have a job, and that they're moving along in society, right?
Right.
We have a woman education center, which helps women find jobs, learn English, and computer skills. And so there's many programs around that. There's different levels of English around that as well. And so with that, that's sort of really
that's all you do, right?
That's all we do. Yeah, that's all we do. And so,
that's tremendous, and we are very excited to have you here with us tonight as we go into this. And so we want to start with let's call it the good, right? So we'll start with the good in this, with where women are today, right? Where things have come from, and this is what I sort of said, like hey, Craig and I can sort of regurgitate all the statistics and research and stuff that's out there, but right now what it's saying is that obviously women make up nearly half of the U.S. workforce, and that the increase in women-owned businesses has jumped dramatically, which is tremendous to see. and that the income even has gone up. We'll talk about the bad of this in a second, but Liz, for you with this, is that sort of what you're seeing or getting the sense of out there in the workforce at this point? I know you just talked about advocacy and helping out, making sure that they stay employed, but from a grander, broader picture, is that what you see?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, women working out in the workforce, I mean, we still have the same obstacles, right? I mean, there's still a work-life balance. There's still equal pay. That's an issue. I mean, we're still not there yet. We're on our way. And certainly with COVID in the mix of all this, it certainly didn't help women that, felt like we were on track to kind of help with the women and equity and getting women back into the workforce. But now it's sort of like a step back because of COVID. Many women had to leave their jobs or take a part-time job or, just to be home with their children and, elderly or whoever, or even themselves being ill. So it's a struggle. It's a constant struggle that we have.
Yeah. Craig, you got to follow up on this?
Well, yeah, just wanted to say one thing. I know when we asked you to do the women's empowerment workshop this evening, I didn't even realize how much you were doing to empower women who were at their most vulnerable stage. And I want to commend you and Rosie's Place for doing that. I never really realized until you put it the way you did so succinctly that you are helping to empower the most, feeling that women who feeling powerless at that moment. What a tremendous thing you're doing. And at the same time, you're breaking your own glass ceilings and moving your staff forward. And I think that's tremendous. But I think the other thing too, I would like to know is, what do you feel are some of the biggest obstacles that women still have to overcome today that maybe men don't even have to think about in the workplace?
I mean, I think it's still the wage. I think women are still not speaking up and getting what they need. I mean, I met with a friend of mine not too long ago, and she's very strong-willed woman, and she, she said to me, she's like, when you're applying for a job, for instance, if there's a job range, a salary range, and if they're going to give you middle of the road, why? You're still going to need to do the same job. Why not ask for the top?
Right.
And it's a salary range. So why not ask for the top and really advocate for yourself, because, you're still going to have to do the same job, right? I mean, the expectations might be a little bit more, but if you're taking on the job, if you feel like you can do the job, why not have the higher pay, right? So that's one consideration, right?
Right. And that segues right into the next slide, which, we had sort of alluded to with the emails that we had sent out, which is that, it ain't all equal. Well, so part of this is they do this thing where they talk about leveling stuff up, right? Whereas, hey, if we leveled everything out, even when you do that, a female ends up getting paid 98 cents for every dollar that a male earns in that leveled up thing that they try to do. When you don't level it up, it's like 20% less. The pay is like 81 cents versus $1 for a male. And you can see the chart as age increases, right? Those gaps get even higher. But when you do it out over time, like the wage gap becomes almost like $500,000. And we're going to talk about that in a little later with, planning and future thinking and some of the issues that come up with that. But in the immediate, as you're just talking about, Liz, like that creates immediate concern, immediate impact on just spending, on just needs and what you're trying to cover with everything. And, I know you just mentioned it in terms of it, but, do you think there are ways that women can advocate stronger, I guess, is the question.
Well, I think what I found was I'm a big proponent on budgets and, trying to set goals and that sort of thing, right? So now just to tie it in a little bit with Rosie's Place, when you think about financial needs and all that, and when you think of Rosie's guests, right, that are poor and homeless, how can, the last thing that they're thinking about is how, the money that they're going to be making and the salary that they're going to be making. That's the very last thing. So when you think about wealth, I think as a woman, I think we think about other areas of wealth that attribute to a woman, like, there's the internal wealth, so the self-knowledge, the self-respect that a woman has in order to move on with their life. So, it's the wealth of, the health and the family, right? So, those are sort of like the things that as a woman, we tend to look at everything all together, encompassing, in order to even think about financial wealth, right? But with that, I think, just setting goals, and just really like monitoring your goals and just following your budget and following your vision and really just sticking to it.
Well, even that, Liz, I mean, a lot of women, well, the more women in human services per se than men, right?
Mhm.
So does that have some kind of like, because they're in the human services area, almost like I don't even want to think about the money aspect? Does that come into play at all? Like,
Um,
I'm here to help. I'm not worried about the money.
yeah, possibly. I mean, I can't really speak for everyone, but yeah, I think that's part of it too. Like women are more apt to go and get help than a man, even though a man may also need services, but a woman is more apt. Well, mostly because women, most, or I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of them have children, right? And so they're asked to you know help with their children, and also so up with their elders and below with their children, right? So it's like
We'll
their
actually
health and
come to that later on, because there's actually a whole part to this about the caregiver and being
yes.
the person in terms of care. And so I just wanted to segue into the next with it, because you had mentioned some of it, right? These are common mistakes, and as they said, common mistakes, they cross genders, right? So this isn't just women, this is everybody in terms of this, but one of the things is the money, and I'll bring Craig in a little bit with his whole thing with this in terms of later on with the emotional aspect of this. But money does make us sometimes feel self-conscious.
Yeah.
Right? We don't like being judged no matter what it is, but being judged about how we either handled money, like if we made a bad mistake or something, we don't want to have that come at us. And so instead, we don't talk about it. I mean, we don't talk about it ever. And that's something that really needs to change from a great grand scheme, because sometimes they always say the biggest argument is always about money. Well, then if the biggest argument is about money, I don't want to talk about it, because it's going to be an argument, but it doesn't go away. The problem is still there. The problem still happens. And so it's really about, need to have the conversation. If you listen to any one of the webinars we've done so far this year, almost every single one of them came back to at some point talking about money, talking about finances, it's a way to be better with money, right? That second one says not taking an active role. If you've heard this before, like fill in the blank doesn't like to deal with money. Craig, I don't know how many times you hear that. And it doesn't matter which role. Again, male, female, one partner doesn't like to deal with money, so I'm the one who deals with it. And you can't have that in a relationship. You have to have some part that you are aware of, or at least participating in with it, right? Or at least know where everything is. Because that's another part of it, is making sure that you understand and where everything is. And again, this is cross-gender. This isn't just women or men, right? Because sometimes it's either. It's just you've got to have that handle on where everything is so you can be better with it. You mentioned debt, right? But debt is being a big thing with that. So when we describe debt, we use the old TV show Lassie. For those who are young in the crowd and don't know Lassie, the TV show, right? So this is what would happen in Lassie. Little Timmy would go skipping out in the woods, go across the field and fall into a well. And then Lassie would come and rescue little Timmy. and he'd go to town, get the people, they get little Timmy out of the well, and then Timmy would all be well and good. The next day, little Timmy'd be out skipping in the woods again, and he'd fall in another well so that Lassie would have to go get him and then rescue him and so on. This is people with debt. I mean, everybody gets into debt. The idea and the construct is to not let yourself keep falling into a well once you've dug yourself out of that situation, because that's what happens. We keep getting into the same habit. We get on, and Craig refers to it as like the hamster wheel, right, Craig, in terms of going through that?
Get off the hamster wheel.
Get off the hamster wheel of debt, right? And so that's it. You talked a little bit, Liz, about that whole making sure you have a plan.
Yeah.
Right. And the last one there talks about, what we like to say is, treat your accounts like a good friend. Check in on them every now and then. Make sure you know what's happening with those accounts. Don't just leave them there and, just forget about it, because then your friendship will fall away. Like Craig said, trying to have a better relationship with your money. Well, check in on your money. Check in on all of your accounts. Make sure you know what's going on. Make sure you know what's happening with all of your accounts, because that's how you're going to be better with them.
Another thing I hear a lot too, Tom, is, well, I really don't have a lot right now to even worry about managing, right? Or I'll get to it later when I get this debt under control. What I say is, if you have a lot of money, then you can make more mistakes. If you don't have a lot of money, you can't afford to make any mistakes. So get the best advice that you can upfront and control it as much as you can. That's going to put you in a better position no matter what.
Right. And Liz, any thoughts from you on that? On
Yeah. What I was going to say was, just getting back to goal setting. Sometimes it's just having a conversation with your partner or your spouse, and just talking about the goals that you want to achieve through the year, right? And then after you talk about your goals and what you want to do for the year, break them down into little chunks, right? So that it doesn't seem so overwhelming, right? So you can have a yearly plan, and then maybe breaking it down into monthly and sometimes even weekly. And that's sort of what we do with our guests. We at the debt clinic, and we set monthly goals for them, and so that they're able to achieve them, and so that they're not so big that they can't reach them, right? So that, because if the goal is so big and you're trying all year to reach that one goal, it's not very satisfying. So if you go along the way and you meet your goals along the way, it's better. It makes you feel better, and it pushes you along to keep at the goals and reaching them. So I would say, first on paper, talk about what it is that you want to do, and then set the number attached to it. And, each person should know like how much each one is making, if possible. If you're in a relationship, you should know how much each one is making, where the money is going for your money and his money or her money, or whatever the spouse situation is. And also the debt, right? So even though you may have separate pools of money, but just knowing that you're both contributing to a pool of money, for instance, so you can both plan to achieve that same goal together. So big proponent on budgets and goals again.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is where Tom meant to inject this conversation, but I also think when you're trying to be very open about money and having that conversation, you have to remember that everybody comes to the table with their own baggage around money.
Yeah.
Right? Their own nightmares, their own skeletons in the closet, their own mistakes, their own insecurities. And so, when you say, well, I should know what my spouse makes, or I should know what bills they have, or I should, sometimes I see people commingle their money, and sometimes I see them keep it separate. And I don't say there's a right or a wrong way to do that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really about having an understanding that, okay, we're going to let these past, indiscretions go, and try to focus on, what's positive moving forward, and keep that communication open.
Right.
Yeah.
The money is not math, money is emotion, and how those emotions affect you when you're dealing with those financial situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things we talk to everybody about, and this is just a quick overview. I'm not going to go too deep here with this and you have to forgive me, my visual is buckets. That's what I use. Some people like bags, some people like pools. I'm a bucket guy, so it's buckets for me with money when we talk about money. But for savings, there really should be three buckets. That first bucket is your emergency reserve, the short-term spending that is available. You know, as advisors, they always give you you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses in the bank. Well, we just don't think that's feasible, especially nowadays with everything that's going on with COVID and quarantine and all of that. But what we suggest is that there's 6 to 8 weeks of expenses in the bank. And if there isn't, that should be the first place that the money is funneling to. Fill bucket number one, get the 6 to 8 weeks of expenses in the bank. Bucket number 2 and 3 are longer term. Bucket 2 may be, you know, a vacation or a purchase, upgrade to a transportation or housing or something. Longer term, bucket 3, that's maybe education for a young child. That might be retirement planning, that type of thing. But you want to make sure that bucket number 1 is getting filled. And then once it's filled, now we can direct assets into bucket 2 and bucket 3. And you just have to think of that in terms of I'm filling the buckets as I go along, but making sure that that short term, that emergency reserve bucket, because going back to debt, that's the first way we get ourselves in debt. We don't have the money to pay for X, whatever you want to have. That's now I've got to spend credit. I've got to use credit to fill that in because I didn't have the funds available.
And as you say, that's how you get off that hamster wheel, right?
Absolutely.
Where you're
Don't
not
fall down the well.
right. So the credit cards are not your emergency reserve fund.
Correct. You don't want that to happen. All right, now we do have a question for you guys. We will throw this out, and it's fine if you want to answer in the chat box. We don't do polls. We haven't really figured that out yet as we go through all of this, but we just like to ask the question. So we are asking the question, but Liz, this is more directed for you, and that is there someone that you turn to for advice?
So for financial advice, I turn to either my parents or my financial advisor. I say my parents, mostly my dad. They were immigrants to this country, and so my dad always, he was the saver in the relationship, and my mom paid all the bills and did all that. And so, they were able to, over the years, just accumulate enough cash to just really pay cash for everything that they wanted, which was always amazing to me. So I always have that in the back of my mind. I wish that I learned a little bit more about from them about that, but yeah. So I always turn to them, and also my financial advisor for bigger goal related things.
Terrific. That's why it's like we talked about, that's having somebody there that you can turn to. It's important, like we said, whether it's finance, tax, or legal advice, you should always have somebody that you're comfortable with, that you can turn to, so that it's Craig, the analogy is on the coach, right? That's
Yes. Yeah. I mean, no matter how good you are, even if you're Tom Brady, you have a coach. Someone
he's actually got 3, but that's okay.
Well, see what I mean? Even as good as he is, he needs 3 coaches. I think you know everything by now, right? But yeah, the most successful people have someone to help guide and
Exactly.
on track.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to point out too is you brought up a good point. The last generation of people knew how to wait to buy something till they could afford it.
Yeah.
What happens today is we're encouraged to, why do you got to wait? Buy it right now. We can put it on credit. It's no big deal. We'll even give you a discount if you do it. So
Yeah.
there is something to be learned from that. Well, and Tom and I do another one that's, wants versus needs. Do I need it right now, or do I just want it right now, right? And I think your parents are really good at saying, well, I want it, but I don't need it. When I need it, I'll have the money for it. So
That's right.
that's another one of those, savings tools.
The little tip there for that is for anybody in the crowd who didn't see or view wants versus needs, take a 24-hour cooling off period. Just you want to buy it, wait 24 hours. If you still have the same urge, same desire for it, then okay, look at going forward. But like Craig said, it's that don't just jump immediately. Say, wait a minute, take a step back. Do I really need this thing now? Can I delay and hold off? Maybe I can save up more and then I don't have to spend as much on credit for it to get it, that type of thing. All right, so
At the same time,
go
at
ahead.
the same time, Tom, I think most of the audience here might be all women. I think women tend to be more spontaneous when it comes to purchases. So if we're gonna have to think about it, we'll probably buy 2 pairs of shoes instead of 1. So I don't know if that theory works.
Again, everybody has, but it could be just that thought process, which is, okay, I'm getting this, but wait, do I really need to get it today? Can I hold off, a day? That's all. It's just that's all the cooling off period.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too is got to go back to is why am I spending money? Like I see some people who spend money emotionally, them using it to fill a gap, right? Why they buy 2 pair of shoes opposed to 1 pair of shoes? Because it's going to make me feel better for a short period of time. And then what happens is the next day you go back to Amazon and click that button and buy something else, right? So the issue really, once again, if you really want to get control over your money, is you got to control over your emotions and how they're affected by the financial decisions that you make.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to go too deep into different types of investments here, but this tends to, and again, this is not gender specific because this happens on both sides. That a lot of times it's just more of bringing the conversation up of the different types of options that are available. Let's face it, some of this stuff is just not that exciting and it gets a little bit overwhelming to try to say, oh, I'm going to spend the time and focus on it. But what happens, and really more for bringing the lesson up, is that a lot of times it's, well, I don't understand, so I'm not going to get involved. And this primarily comes up with retirement plans and participating in a company offered retirement plan that, and again, it's not gender specific. We see it on both sides that it's, well, I don't understand that, so I'm not going to get involved. When taking a little bit of time or reaching out to that professional that's part of it or attached to that plan, or somebody that you might know who can then spend the time with you to sort of go through it. That's the idea and the concept, because the one thing you can never get back in dealing with investments is time, right? We can add more money, we can do all sorts of stuff, but time in is the long term. That's going to be better than anything else. So it's really not, it's good to understand everything, but you don't need to have as detailed a dive of an understanding to start being involved, especially when we're talking about a retirement plan through your employer to participate in.
Well, is this another one of those like stereotypes too, where women through school, were less aggressive in math and science and all those types of things. And so when you start talking about money and numbers, it's almost like a natural gender thing to tune out. I mean, I think it's fantastic what STEM is doing now and empowerment of math and sciences for women. But is that something that you would see as being an issue, Liz? That women just kind of naturally turn, like my wife says, I don't math. Like I don't do this.
It's funny. It's either, it depends on what part of the brain you are, right? So I think you're either a numbers person or you're not, and I think that's why women tend to shy away from that if they're not. I think that even if men shy away from money, I feel like they feel like they need to take it on because a woman may not take it on, right?
I got a man up. Is that what you're telling me?
What's that?
I got a man up. Is that what you're
You got to man up. That's right. but it's interesting coming from a financial and accounting background. A lot of times I just think that everybody knows numbers, and then until you start to talk with different people and you engage with different people in conversations, that you find out that not everyone understands a budget, not everyone understands what financial literacy and that sort of thing, and it's interesting. So I would say don't be afraid of it. I mean, you know, it's all part of life, I think. I mean, you have to face it. You have to learn how to spend wisely and learn how to, you know, save wisely as well.
Well,
Yeah,
that
no, spending versus saving, absolutely. You know,
brings
correct.
up another good point is the fact that people are, a lot of people are very good at paying their bills.
Yeah.
They're not very good at saving money, as Tom was just starting to talk about saving versus spending.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that people don't realize, that they should make themselves a bill. They should put themselves first. That's how they start getting off that hamster wheel. They see themselves as just as important as the electric bill or the cable bill, depending on HBO Max or whatever you have to have.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right, so I'm going to make investing, hopefully this will make sense at some point here. Not that necessarily I ever do, but that's okay. So there's two things on the screen. The first one is the roll of toilet paper. So first off, with COVID and the quarantine, you're never going to look at a roll of toilet paper ever again, but the same way. But for us, it's an analogy to what happens sometimes in this, especially with investments. You know, we go back a year ago, exactly a year ago, you know, today, you weren't thinking about toilet paper. You had to fast forward about 5 or 6 weeks really before this became this thing for everybody. But you still, like, even the beginning of, you know, April timeframe, you really weren't thinking about toilet paper. But then you happen to talk to a friend of yours who said, you know, it's an interesting thing. I was at, you know, Shaw's the other day and they were completely out of toilet paper. And you think to yourself, well, okay, that's kind of strange. And then you went to, you know, wherever, Roach Brothers or some other store, and they were all out of toilet paper. Now suddenly it gets into your brain and you're like, well, wait a minute, what's going on with toilet paper? Do I need toilet paper? And then you went to Costco and Costco didn't have toilet paper. And now you're freaking out because now you're like, wait a minute, I've got to get toilet paper. And it becomes this top of mind and I got to have it. I got to do it. I got to find it, you know, now type of thing. And that's what happens sometimes in investing. You know, a lot of times we start to hear, you know, wait, what's somebody getting? You had this whole stuff going on with GameStop and everything over the last month or so, where the market was being run up by some things. And it's like, well, wait, why am I not getting that? Why am I not participating? Why am I not doing this? And what happens is the other part of the screen there, which is one of my favorite characters of all time, which is Tigger, just in a frenzy of buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. And ultimately, that's never going to end well. And really what you want to do is you want to find the mix that's right for you. Ignore the noise, ignore all that craziness, and just find the right mix for your particular time, because it's not about return. Everything to do with investing is all about risk. It's all about how much risk are you willing to take. The slide here goes through the emotions of a market cycle. And every single market does the same thing, right? We start on optimism, you know, hey, it looks good, you know, maybe I'll start to get in. And then things run up and we're buying on euphoria. Everything is great, everything is buying, you know, I'm in. And then it starts to slide a little sideways, but we talk ourselves out of it. Like, you know, it's like, well, no, it's still going to be good. It's still going to be good. And I go through this denial and fear. And then finally we sell in depression because we got to get out. We just can't take it anymore and we're out. And every time it goes this, and then we start again with optimism. Every market sort of cycles the same way. Try to take yourself off the roller coaster ride, right? As the thing says, you know, the only person who ever, you know, gets hurt in a roller coaster is the one who tries to jump off mid-ride. Find a right mix. It's risk, not return. Don't worry about what somebody else is getting for a return. It only matters for you. Whenever we get asked, you know, hey, what's the return going to be? The response is, how much are you willing to lose? Because it's all about the risk that you're willing to take. The more risk, the more opportunity for gain, but you still have that opportunity for loss. So you just want to make sure you're trying to, Liz had mentioned about life balance earlier. It's the same idea with investments. I'm trying to balance off how much risk I'm willing to take for what I'm going to get as a return. Everything else is honestly is white noise. And you don't really need to involve yourself with it because you're probably not going to affect it anyway. But what you want to find is the right mix that works for you, so you don't have that seesaw motion going on with all of your investments.
Well, isn't it true too that a lot of people try to do the, forget it type of move, where they're taking a lot of the, dated funds, target dated funds.
Target date funds, right?
Right. So you can set it and forget it and let it have a glide, as we say, glide path, right?
Well, no, but so in that case, that's one of those. So if you have not been participating in a retirement plan, or you're thinking about it or looking at it, right? Most plans nowadays have a target date fund. Target date fund just says, hey, we're going to find the nearest mix based at your age 65 for that year, whether it is 2040, 2045, 2050, whatever year that is. And we're going to put you into that mix. And as Craig said, there'll be a glide path that will take you all the way from aggressive to conservative through the glide path. But for somebody who is not participating because they're worried about or not sure, like Liz says, that whether or not you know it or you don't know it, it's a good way to get in. Like I said, time is more valuable than anything else. So at least if you're doing that, you're participating, and it's going to be managed for you.
What about, some women who really just want to learn a little bit about how investments work? Are some of those apps, and not to give anybody a plug, but like Robinhood or E-Trade or any of those types of things, how should people, are those good ways to start to learn about investing?
Well, so Robinhood, E-Trade, those are investing apps. So
Okay.
they're not really literacy apps, right? So, Liz talked earlier about some of the stuff that Rosie does, which is trying to give financial literacy, right? So the idea is trying to get some information. You're more apt to go into some of the other providers out there, which will have more details on individual investments than say the app would, because the app is really just an investment platform.
Sometimes though, I get a lot of clients who want to do some of that e-trading, and they want to buy and sell stocks, and you get into the whole exciting end of that you hear about, especially when you see like movies like The Wolf of Wall Street and all those types of things. That's more, but in my book, when I talk to people, more like gambling than it is investing. Would that be?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Well, so it depends on how much risk you're willing to take. Right? If you're willing to say, I'm going to risk it all and I don't care what happens from there, then that's fine. But you've got to have that mindset that, okay, if it's 5,000, 10,000, whatever it is, if it goes to zero, I don't care. That's how they have to look at that, because that's the risk. You've got to be able to accept the risk of loss before you can actually be looking at how much gain you want to have.
So, because if you don't, these trips between euphoria and depression are going to be very short, right?
Well, right. Well, yeah. Then you get into the whole what happens is you end up selling out in fear before you get to the actual full slide, and you might get out before the market bounces back. Is what happens if you haven't built in how much of a floor you want to have available for you.
So the approach I usually tell people is more the tortoise and the hare, right? I want to be the tortoise. I want to run the long and straight race.
Yeah, because otherwise you don't know what's going
Consistent.
to happen. Right. So Liz, got another question for you here, right? So have you ever felt out like you did, we didn't mean to do it to you there, so obviously we just did it in terms of going through that with the back and forth, but we did try to bring you in. But no, I mean that from, like, you ever felt like somebody was talking, whether you're there with other counterparts or there with a partner, and they're more talking to the other person than they are including you in the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of an instance where Bitcoin came out, and they were trying to explain how that whole thing worked. And yeah, so the focus is always like man to man, right? And so that's like a common thing where men tend to gravitate to men instead of just staying working, talking to a woman. But that's that was one thing. That was one place where I felt left out. But on the other hand, because of my accounting background and finance, I feel like people like to talk to me about those kind of things, and And so in the most part, I am included in the conversation. So.
Good. You know, it just, again, it was more of a question thing and for the crowd so that, you know, obviously we don't know the answer when we're asking her in terms of dealing with that and going through it. But sometimes that's just generic from our industry, the feedback that we get, right? The feedback that comes is that, oh, it was husband and wife, but it was like he was just talking to the husband the whole time. He didn't include me as part of the conversation. You know, and so it's one of those that goes back to, like Liz was talking about before, about needing to, you know, make sure you're part of the conversation. Make sure you know what's happening with everything, because that's what's really important here.
Let me ask you this, Liz. How do women talk to each other about money? I mean, do you talk about investments? Do you talk about retirement plans? Do you talk about those types of things? Or do you talk about Bitcoin?
I think it depends. Like I have different friends, you know, friends from growing up and friends from different places that I've worked and college and so on. So I think it depends on who I'm with. So if I'm with the girlfriends that I grew up with, I won't necessarily talk about money because we all have different backgrounds and different career paths. But if I'm talking to someone that I graduated college with, then I'm more likely, or, you know, part of like a financial executive leadership program or something like that. Obviously, I'm more apt to talk about it, but I would say for the most part, we don't. I would, that would be my thought on that.
Well, nobody does. So, I mean, that's part of it, right? That's part of what we talked about before. Nobody does. It's not like
Yeah.
you do it either, you know? So it's one of those things. It's more about having that conversation, you know? So one of the things we do want to talk about here with, you know, ultimately, now we are being stereotypical because women take better care of themselves than men. And statistically, that means that you are right now on average living 5+ years longer on average than a man, which brings all sorts of other, you know, considerations into this. One, you're going to be around longer and more than likely not have us if you are married in the equation, which is why the number one thing up there is long-term care insurance. The likelihood that you are going to be alive into your late 80s and early 90s is a very high likelihood. Where guys, we tend to go earlier. Doesn't mean we don't need the care, because let's face it, we are paying, so we do need the care. But for females, it's more likely that even if you're married, that you're going to end up being single. And obviously, if you are single, you're single. So that you are going to need some assistance with that care. The others, that the next two are, you know, about making sure that the documents are all up to date, the will, the power of attorney, the healthcare proxy, because living will is not recognized here in Massachusetts. Those things are dictating what's going to happen for you, your stuff, and your care, right? So you want to make sure that that's part of it. And then the last one is Social Security. And one of the things with Social Security, specifically with Social Security claiming, is a lot of it has to do with longevity. And if you have longevity and you're healthy and you're taking care of yourself and you're going to be around for longer, then it certainly makes sense to extend those, you know, hold off on claiming those benefits for as long as possible, because you're going to make up for that later on versus claiming at an earlier age where you get penalized. You get a lower amount than you do if you wait until what is known as FRA in Social Security terms, your full retirement age. So a lot of that comes into the factor of things you've got to be talking about, or at least considering, as females get older, because that's part of it. You are going to be around for longer, statistically speaking.
Well, I can tell you from experience too, Tom, that I, with my personal clients, like working with women, whether they understand finance or not. The reason for that is because they don't have the mortality issues that a lot of men tend to have. In other words, we don't, you know, men tend to think they're Superman. They're going to live forever. They're never going to be hurt, and everything's going to be okay. Where women tend to be planners. Well, that's all well and good, but just in case, I want to make sure I've got the long-term care in place. I want to make sure you'll have the life insurance. I want to make sure that we're going to be okay when we retire. And so from that point, like I said, I don't believe that, you know, money is math. Well, there's a certain aspect to that. It's really about the notion of how can money provide that security for you now and in the future. And so for that aspect, not to put a gender role in anything, but I find women are very, very good at planning once they have those tools in place. So they really shouldn't be afraid of that because they're naturally very, very good at it from what I have seen.
Right. And so Liz, asking that question and sort of flipping that around a little bit, because we talked about, hey, the need and it's necessary to have the conversation, right? What happens if the partner doesn't want to have the conversation?
Well, I would say, you can have a conversation with the financial planner yourself and just kind of, if you're not going to have the conversation with your spouse about combining or talking about goals together, maybe you can talk to a financial advisor and then he or she can walk you through what it is that you might need because of all these things, because you're going to live longer, because you're going to be healthier, because you're going to need all this long-term care and so on. And you're always going to be the caretaker for your elders and your children. So so I would say, meet with a financial advisor and really just talk it through with them and see what it is that they can help you with to navigate and not feel alone about talking about finances.
One little tip I want to give you too is the fact that especially when it comes to life insurance and men do not like to have the life insurance conversation. The issue, though, as Tom already pointed out, is women typically live longer than men. So it's women that are going to have this financial difficulty if the man passes away. So even if it is the woman owns the policy on the man and pays the premium and the man's just the insured, get the man insured. Get past that obstacle. Don't let that be a sticky point, right? Because you're not getting life insurance for you. You're getting life insurance for the people you care about.
That's right.
Right? So, and when you talk about, longevity, long-term care, all those other things that come with living older, they come with expenses. And so, like I said, get past that. Even if you got to be the one to say, okay, we'll keep our finances separate, but I want you to be an insured person. I'll pay the bill. That's fine with me. Right? So something to think about.
Okay. So I'm going to go quickly through this because this is 5 steps that you can take, right? That really can sort of help you. First one is trust your instincts. Right. So despite what we've sort of talked about and some of the stereotypes, women are actually very good with money. Right. As Liz had mentioned, you're more detailed, you have more understanding, you're going to make like informed choices. I mean, that's what the research shows is that you tend to be a much more informed investor, informed buyer when it comes to things. So it's sort of don't push that off to the side. Don't fall into that trap of it. Make sure that you're listening to that inner voice and trust your instincts, right? The other thing we say is find the things that value. We talk about this all the time with the stuff that we do, which is, there's all sorts of stuff out there. There's all kinds of white noise going on, but at the core of everyone is that value and that belief that's going to drive what it is you're doing. What's important to you, like Liz talked about, whether it's being the caretaker, whether it's the kids or the parents or whatever the case may be, there's a reason that that's important for you and that you do that. So it's find that core belief in terms of what makes sense for you, right? So Liz already shared with you a past to present story. So the idea is to sort of go back in time with yourself and, picture yourself as a child and what were some of the lessons or some of the things that you saw from your parents or that you had as an early memory about money and sort of try to build from there. Because some of it, like Liz talked about, hers was obviously, I was going to ask you about it, Liz, but I don't have to because you gave it to us, about your dad and savings and being able to buy everything with cash. Like that's a very positive message, but a lot of us don't have positive messages, right? We have others that there were fights or that there was debt or that, it couldn't afford something. And you have to sort of understand and look inside yourself and see, wait a minute, is that affecting my current way I'm handling money, is that affecting how I'm dealing with things because of that past memory that I have? So you want to sort of take a look at that and just sort of, go a little back in time and think, gee, do I have something inside me that's causing this block for me? Or as Craig said, how I happen to have this emotional baggage dealing with money, right? Seek financial advice. Liz has already beat this one up. So she was way ahead of us in terms of this as far as it, but it is that, we talk about it with everything, right? Tax, legal, all sorts of advice. It's find the professional and work with a professional, because that's why they're here. They're here to give guidance and advice to do that, right? And then, the last one is really, I think, the most important. This is the most telling of them all, is that women tend to take more of the caretaker role. Just research and statistics, not putting anything on that, but you tend to think of others before you think of yourself. And a lot of that sort of comes across in planning. You tend to plan more short-term and for immediate needs, and for taking care of those who immediately need help and support, versus looking for your own long-term benefit, just sort of what we just talked about there, whereas that some of that gets pushed off to the side, and you do need to take a step back and say, wait a minute, I got to look at myself and what's going on with me, and then I can go and do X, Y, and everything else that you're going to get and have to deal with. But that is a big part of it, is making sure that you're taking that step back and looking at and saying, wait, I got to take care of my stuff, like Craig mentioned about, making sure paying yourself, it's also taking care of yourself. So that's a big part of it, because the statistics show women tend to plan, you just plan shorter term than you do longer term. And as I shared with you, you're going to live longer in the great grand scheme of it.
The other thing I'll give kudos to Liz on is that she is pushing seek financial advice, because men tend to be do-it-yourselfers. Doesn't matter. I can do my own electrical. Yeah, I'll electrocute myself, but it's okay. I'll figure it out. My wife constantly yells at me for doing my own plumbing. Can you just hire a plumber? Women are like, just hire the plumber, will you?
Get the guy.
Exactly.
Get it done.
Go find the guy.
Go find the guy. Get it done.
Yeah.
Already.
Get the guy.
And that's never more true than talking about financial advice, because there's so much to know that even if you are a do-it-yourselfer, you can't know it all. I mean, even Tom and I constantly doing more education, constantly doing more training. Every year there's more rules and all these things that come out that if you're not on top of your game, you can't take full advantage of. So this is really an area where financial advice is something, you should make sure you have somebody competent who can guide you. So kudos to you, Liz, for pushing that whole thing.
All right, so real quick here, failing to plan is planning to fail. So again, the Aries Foundation is here. If you need help getting started, you can reach out to us. We do this. There's no cost. There's no obligation. Our goal, our mission is trying to help everybody have a better relationship with their money. So, we say to everybody, take advantage of us. That's why we're here. We're here to try to help. If you need, even if it's just, as Liz said, a little bit of guidance, a little bit of direction on where you're trying to get to, whether it's you're trying to do a budget for the first time, or just trying to, make ends meet, or get yourself a better course of action as far as dealing with debt, we can help you out with that. That's why we're here.
Yeah, let us help you take that first step. Let's
Yeah.
make it easy for you. And
And really the idea here is that, trying to help everybody have that what we call the clear vision of the road ahead. As Liz mentioned, if you're trying to take on a huge goal, well, it becomes very difficult. We the one we did before, which was that your goals, Liz, should be wicked smack, right? You need to have had SMART goals, right? They need to be, strategic, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. That's
Right.
what SMART stands for in terms of goal setting. But that's the idea. And you want to have something that's going to be a reward with that. You mentioned about breaking them down into little tiny steps and little pieces, because that's really what works, right? You want to have it, but you want to have something, there's a reward that goes along with that, because what the brain says is, hey, I did it. I can do this again.
Yeah.
I could take on a little bit bigger of a piece in time in doing that. So that's part of having that vision of where you want to get to. I will say this. We are going to send everybody out. These are evaluation forms. They're online. It's a couple of clicks and you can go through it. We value all of the feedback and support we get from everybody. We do value that input. We are a nonprofit, so we do ask if you do ever get anything or see any of our emails or posts or anything, please share it because we're trying to get the word out about what we do. This is Craig and I in our more formal attire when we're actually out there and being serious in the world. As you can see, this is about as serious as we take ourselves. But that's us. If you've ever seen us around at any of the conferences or any of the events out there, we're usually in, those are custom, they were custom Brady jerseys. Now we just call them custom Patriots jerseys, unfortunately. So what's on tap? We keep the think with a drink thing going. Next week, we're going to do should I buy or rent? And that is things, not just houses, right? Should I purchase something outright or lease it or buy it on credit? And when are the pros and cons? Does that make sense? We'll do a dive into reverse mortgages, how those work, you know, disability insurance. On the 18th, it's pandemic unemployment assistance, taxes, and how you're going to have to deal with all of that. And then on the 25th, the financial consequences of divorce. That's what's coming up for the next couple of weeks. Craig, any questions out there? Because I know I'm a little over time right now.
No, I do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One I hope we answered, but we'll see. The first one is, are there good websites or resources you can recommend to find reputable financial planners or estate planners?
So you can go to CFP, right? So that's the Certified Financial Planner, CFP.com. They'll have a list of people who are in the area. You can go, one of the places that I always recommend is no matter who you look up or when you look them up, you go to FINRA, that's FINRA.org, and then /broker check. And that's broker, BROKERCHECK. And what you can do is look up the individual. So if you're searching somebody online, you pop them up and you can go in and on finra.org, you can look them up and see who they are, how long they've been doing it, what licenses they have, and most importantly, if they've ever had any violations against them. I will say this for point of fair disclosure. If you look me up, you got to use my full name. It's Thomas with a V, Alessi, because there's two of me in the database. He's Thomas F, I'm Thomas V. So if you look us up, look up Thomas V Alessi in the database, and you'll get all of my information. What's next, Greg?
The next one I have is, do any of the presenters have any good budget or financial planning trackers?
So we have a spreadsheet. If you shoot us out info@aries.org, that's coming up. But it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can just drop in and customize as much as you want. It's fairly simple to use.
And I can tell you from personal experience, having run my own business and do my own personal finances, that I've used both QuickBooks and Mint. The thing I like about Mint is it's free. So that's a nice tool to start with. And QuickBooks, like I said, if you own a small business or in that realm, it's very easy to use, very user-friendly. So another really inexpensive way to go.
Anything else?
Nope, that's all I have, which is amazing. So I think we must have answered everybody's questions once again.
So for Liz, I'm going to give, this is Rosie's place. This is Rosie's place info. You can see it's webmaster@rosiesplace.org. If you go onto the site, you'll see the donate page. Any support, any help you can give to Rosie's Place. Liz already told you about all the work they do. It's a tremendous organization. Anything you can give, anything you can do for them, greatly appreciated. They are one of the true institutions in Boston. And we are very, very excited, pleased to have Liz with us here tonight. So Liz, we want to say thank you again for being on with us, because that was really tremendous of you. And like I said, the website is ariesfoundation.org. There is contact forms on the website, but you can also go just shoot us an email. It's info@ariesfoundation.org. It'll come right to one of us, and we can certainly answer or get any information out to you. And with that, I am going to stop my share and say thank you, everyone. and have a great evening.
And thank you, Liz, for your participation this evening. It was fantastic.
Thanks,
Oh,
Liz.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Go enjoy the rest of that wine.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.